Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. In a piece in the London Review of Books, Seymour Hersh debunks the American narrative of the capturing of Osama Bin Laden. He says the official version is more like a fairy tale than fact. Now joining us from his office is Seymour Hersh. Thanks very much for joining us.
Sure.
So the basic thesis, if I understand correctly, is the two top military leaders of Pakistan, the chief of the army and the chief of the ISI, in fact, not only knew where bin Laden was and not only cooperated with the Americans, but the entire official version that this was done as a completely unilateral American mission is a lie.
That's pretty good, accurate description of. That's exactly right. I think the way I usually say it is the president authorized the raid in the SEAL team, American SEAL team, SEAL Team 6, which is our most. These are good people. This is the sort of the cream of crop of this, because the special forces. They did go into Abbottabad, this little resort town outside of Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan, where bin Laden was a prisoner or under the control of the Pakistanis for years.
Since 2006. And
they killed him. Period. Came back, successful mission. After that, most of the other story just isn't right.
Now, the 10,000-word article, it's extremely detailed. We're not going to try to go through the whole, all the details, because people should go read the article. Not only is it very detailed, but it's also a great read. So go read it. That being said, a few questions. Why wouldn't the Americans want to capture bin Laden and interrogate him?
We would. We would have wanted to very much. You're getting ahead of the curve here. Let me just do the chronology for you. What happens is in 2010, a guy that worked, a retired military officer who was involved in something to do with the building in which bin Laden was a prisoner, or what you will, in Abbottabad. Some guy that he had something to do with the security, maybe provided guards for the complex, but he was a retired officer on contract with the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI. That's what it is. It's the counterpart to our CIA, the Pakistani counterpart. This guy walks into the American embassy in Islamabad and wants there's a bounty. We put about $25 million reward for the guy's head. And so this guy comes in and he wants the money, and he tells us where bin Laden is and tells us a lot of other information. He says bin Laden was picked up by the Pakistanis somewhere in the rural district near the border with Afghanistan, a place called Waziristan, in a mountain area. And they had him as a prisoner basically since '06. He also says, we later learned that the Pakistanis had told the Saudis about it. And the Saudis' position with the Pakistanis was, we'll build a house for him. We'll build the complex where he was staying. We'll pay for that. We'll give you some money. We don't know how much. I think a lot. I've heard a lot, but I don't know. I just don't know what the answer is. We'll pay you not to tell the Americans. Why? Because the last thing they want is to have the Americans go interrogate Osama Bin Laden about who was giving him money back in '01 when he took down New York and Washington. So that's the reasonable assumption.
Because according to the Senate co-investigation into 9/11 Congressional Committee, Bob Graham and such, many, according to Graham, Saudi government officials are in on financing and facilitating the 9/11 attacks.
Well, we don't have the money transfer. We don't have the empirical evidence, but getting bin Laden to say something would have been important. And so that was a pretty good reason. The other reason, the Pakistanis have their own axe to grind in the world. They don't have to tell us everything. But in any case,
One more question. Why not kill him then?
What do you mean, why not kill him?
Why not kill bin Laden?
Where?
If you're afraid of, once they have him, why not kill him? Why keep him for 6 years?
Well, first of all, they're being paid to keep him. Second of all, as long as they have bin Laden, the Pakistani intelligence service can go to the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Taliban in Pakistan and also to the jihadists, the Sunni wackos in both countries, and say, we got your guy. And you have to understand, at this point, bin Laden was 10 times more than, a huge number more popular than we were, than America is. America at one point was polls showed only 8% of the people in Pakistan liked us. They didn't like us. They saw us as guys that dropped bombs on them, which we just may be. And so the issue was just to go kill him. If Pasha and Kiani, the two generals who ran the country then, the army general was named Kiana, the head of the intelligence service was named Pasha. If they had just gone and whacked the guy, if anything had come out, leaked out, I'm just giving you a reason for that. This never came up in my interviews. because I was always looking at it from the American point of view. But it would make sense to me that the last thing they'd want to have happen is let the population know that they were involved in killing Bin Laden. How would you keep that a secret? So that makes sense, but your question is good and unanswered.
Okay. We're going to go through much of the specifics of the story. But this all really comes down to confidence in you, that you have sources, because your sources you can't reveal, or don't reveal.
I could, but they'd be in jail the next day with a pretty tough government here.
And I understand that. And the key source is a retired former American intelligence official who seems to know very much about the inside of all this. And there's a great detail of the mission, of the background to this. So this is somebody who, two things. One, you've placed your career in his hands, and he's placed his life to a large extent in your hands.
Go ahead. I just don't talk about sources. You're free to talk about all you want. All I can tell you is that the sources that I describe are primary sources. And of course, as I also said in the article, I'm capable of taking some of the most inside stuff I learn and finding others who know about it.
That was my follow-up question, which is how do you know, given how much you have at stake in terms of your own credibility here, how do you verify what he says?
Well, I've always, I'm dealing with a core group of people that I've known for a long time, and I've written a lot of stories in the last, particularly since 9/11, a lot of tough stories about, some of the junk we did in Afghanistan and also in Iraq during the war there. Torture, killings, murder, a lot of very bad stuff that, one could argue that America had to get that bloody in the war on terror. That makes sense to me. But there was an awful lot of not so much smart stuff. There was stuff done inside, assassinations done, done with the Israelis inside Iran. There was a lot of stuff I wrote about over the last 10, 12 years that have, gotten a lot of people's attention and a lot of criticism, etc. So it's not as if I'm dealing with somebody tabula rasa. This is somebody I've worked with a long time and
have been able to verify over the course of time.
It's even more, just to give you more detail. The raid took place in U.S. time on the late in the night of May 2nd, 4 years ago, 2011. Within 2 or 3 days, I heard from people here and people in Pakistan that there were problems, that the whole story that the White House was being told was really off. And the critical thing about the whole idea of working with the Pakistanis and doing it, the White House does not want to acknowledge. And right now, there's been a couple of stories written in the last 2 days, both by NBC and now by the Dawn. I just see AFP, the French press agency, a story out of Pakistan saying 2 more people have claimed that there was a walk-in. That this, basically backing up what I wrote. And the White House's position now is, well, there may have been a walk-in, but he had nothing to do with getting Bin Laden.
The walk-in happens in 2010?
Yeah, the walk-in, August of 2010.
So for like 2 years, the United States government has a fair idea where Bin Laden is alleged to be. And so what happens?
Well, 2010, he's in August of 2010. The raid takes place 9 months later in May. So it's a year and 3 months. So what happens is once you get the walk-in, the first thing you do, walk-ins, being sometimes shady characters, some guy says, hey, where's my money? They flew in a team from Washington to polygraph him. He passes the test. He's also known. People know he's not a guy that isn't known in Pakistan. He's got some flair. And so we start working it without telling the Pakistanis. And we get to the point after some weeks, we set up a safe house near the, Bin Laden's living in a compound, as I said, in a resort city, but he's sort of at the low end of it. It's sort of a shaggy place, and it's got high walls and no sign of any internet connections. There's no evidence of any power even really significantly. And we can't get a fix on it. So, and meanwhile, we're telling the president, they're briefing the president as they have to, and the president's saying, absolutely correctly, I'm not going to touch this. You guys have, bring me,
And how do you know that? That the president said that? This comes.
I'm
not saying you tell me the source, but
no, I'm not. How do I know what he said literally? No, I don't know. I was using what the president said is, I need more evidence. That's what he said. The president made it clear that that wasn't good enough. So at that point, they go to the Pakistanis. They go to see the 2 ranking generals, General Kiani head of the Army, and General Pasha, head of the intelligence service, the ISI, the counterpart to, as I said, the counterpart to the CIA. And we say to those guys, whatever you say, you rats, why didn't you tell us this? What's going on? And eventually they squeeze them, as I mentioned, money talks.
Now, just your point on the article that they start slowing down the flow of money to the military because there's enormous.
There's always a flow, and there's always on the table and under the table stuff too. So we take care of the boys, and so all that is cut back, and so they begin to cooperate. We set up a 4-man team at a very secret base called, not so secret, but there's secret activities there called Gaza, Tarbela Gaza, about 15 minutes flying time from Abbottabad. That's the main headquarters for us, and we're there. And we're beginning to, we're going to send a bunch of SEALs in there to kill this guy. We want to know how many steps are there to his room. There's steel doors. How strong is the steel door? How much dynamite do we have to use to blow it? We're not going to get a key. And so we know we have to get all this information. What's the square like? What kind of security? It was arranged that with the Pakistanis were guarding it. They had guards there at night. I don't know many, whether it was 4, 6, 8. I've heard numbers as many as 8 to 12, but they probably rotate. And so the guards were instructed eventually to, as soon as they hear the rotors of our choppers coming, get out. The SEALs were going to land with no opposition. There was no firefight there. There was no reason to fight your way in.
Do we have any idea how many guards there were?
No. We have a number, but
Because one thing that I wonder about is if they've been holding him since 2006. There's pretty good evidence that there are sections of the ISI and the Army, and including the Navy, that have been infiltrated. Have a lot of Al-Qaeda supporters, Taliban supporters.
You bet.
Yet there doesn't seem to have been an attempt by any of them to free Bin Laden over these years.
I don't think. I think it was kept pretty slow, pretty quiet. Of course. I mean, my God, they're not going to pass it around. One of the big worries we have about Pakistan, don't forget, that's sort of the elephant in the room with Pakistan at all times, is their nuclear arsenal. They're between, when I did a story about it about 4 or 5 years ago, it was more than 100 weapons then, and they've been producing it still. They're still producing enriched uranium, and I think they even started a plutonium reprocessing facility. So they have an ability to make more bombs, and they are making more bombs. And so we have to try and keep our relationships with the top of that army very tight, because that's the only leverage we have. Is we have arms. We want them to trust us.
So, if I understand it correctly, President Obama makes a deal with
well, the president's not involved in this. I mean, he's getting briefings on it. What happens is, the president says, "I need more." So we go to the Pakistans. One of the first things they do is they assign a doctor, an Army major that's also a doctor, a specialist in nephrologist. Actually, I understand. They assign him to live in a house next door, close by the house at Abbottabad, where Bin Laden lives. He's treating him. He also gets DNA for us. This is before the end of the year. So now we can tell the president, the guys who want to do the mission, we've got DNA on the guy. And the Pacs
How does he get the DNA?
He's a doctor. He's treating him. He's ill. I mean, they snuffed out. They killed the guy that was pretty sick. This isn't the best day in the sun for the SEALs. They had a mission to do, and they did it. And the idea that, it was, as I said, it was never to be made public. They did it. The whole idea was you go kill the guy, you come out with the body. This Pakistani said, kill him and take the body. You come out, and you don't tell anybody. The plan was that in 7 to 10 days, the White House the president was going to announce that we had a drone raid in the Hindu Kush Mountains. In the mountains, it's the same mountain range where we picked up Bin Laden in the first place, and we did an after act. We go and look at it after the attack, and sure enough, there's a tall guy that looks like Bin Laden. We take his picture, we take some DNA, we got him. That was the plan. The night of the raid, everything worked. A chopper went down, but so what? Who cared? The electricity was cut 4 hours before the raid. A chopper went down and they had to blow it because the cockpit had some very sensitive aviation and communications gear. You can imagine we were speaking really encrypted stuff on this mission. And so they have to blow it. There's a big fire going on, a lot of noise, no police, no fire department, no lights anywhere. Did we do all that? The Pakistanis clearly did. I'm just telling you what's literally factually there. And that was all the reports. I don't know I don't know how anybody could walk away from this and not think Pakistan has something to do with it, but that's neither here nor there. That's easy to say afterwards. And so they fly out. When they fly out, they have to take a body. I don't know what use the body is to them, because they're going to find another guy in another week, But I just don't know. And then everybody discovers the game plan is completely changed. Obama went public, and why does he go public? He went public because I'm sure that he got tremendous pressure after they realized they'd killed him to not wait 10 days or 7 days. You've got a Republican guy, Bob Gates, in the running the Defense Department. He's involved. You've got a lot of guys that like to brag, and the military are always full of guys that yap. You can't be sure in a week or 10 days you can hold a secret. So go. So he goes, and the president gets a speech to deliver. Sometimes he writes his speeches. He's quite good at that. But in this case, he gets a speech delivered. I have no idea what's in his head. And those when people say the government did lie, I don't know whether he knew that what he was writing wasn't accurate or not. I just don't know, because often a president is confronted, he's dealt with what he gets. I have no information about that. But in the statement, he makes a lot of things, he says a lot of things that drives everybody nuts. Meanwhile, you've got a bureaucracy. You've got a problem. You now have a body, you have some SEALs that know a lot. The whole game plan's destroyed.
And you've betrayed essentially the Pakistani leaders.
You've certainly taken advantage of them. And what are their options? If Pasha and Kiani say, "The hell with you, America, we're going to tell the truth, you double-crossed us," A, there goes the money. B, all kinds of people in Pakistan are going to come after them. All the people like Bin Laden, they're going to have to.
This was the whole point, to protect them from this kind of revenge that would come.
Exactly, and that was why you, as you say to me, why couldn't they just go whack them? Because if they whacked them, if the Pakistanis whacked them directly themselves and it leaked out, boy, they're in trouble. So this was a sort of a way to cover the whole thing and make it easy. And instead, what the president said, and this was a speech that was just written by the political guys, as I've been told, emphatically. And he said, for example, we got a lead in August last year. Well, in the CIA, a lead is often a walk-in. It's not couriers running around giving you something you deduce. It's something handed to you. So everybody got edgy about that. And then he said there was a firefight, and Bin Laden was killed, as if Bin Laden had an AK-47, was shooting away. That wasn't so. And so now you had to invent a firefight. He said we got a treasure trove of information. Now you had to invent a treasure trove of information that nobody's seen yet. We've never had more information about Al Qaeda and what it was doing. We haven't seen a thing about it. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not much. And so all these things, you had to be in a rush and put out a whole new package of what's going on. So that led in the first couple of days to incredible stories. First of all, the political guys in the White House, and John Brennan, his head of counterinsurgency and counterterror, and others, all of a sudden they're presented with a press corps that's begging, feed me, feed me, feed me, like in that movie. Feed me, feed me. And so they feed them. The first round is the guys entered, and there was people came out with guns, and they shot a bunch of people. There was a firefight. Then they went in there, and Bin Laden had a gun and was cowering behind two women, and they shot him. And then eventually they had to walk away from that very quickly within a few days. That was embarrassing. There were other stuff though that they said that kept on going. You had to invent a treasure. You had to invent a treasure trove. So they started. This is a place that always had been described as a primitive place with no internet. So now they're briefing that the SEALs, when they went in to kill the guy, after they shot him, took 15 bags or 15 computers out. And in a book written by a book that was read in advance by the government called No Easy Day by a guy named Bissonnette, one of the SEALs who was on the mission. He describes and says, we went down to the second floor, and there was he had an office with computers and discs and sticks, what do they call those sticks?
USB sticks.
Yeah, USB sticks. And we got all of that stuff, as if Bin Laden was sort of keeping it there for them, waiting for them to take it. It was just a ludicrous story, but it matched what the president said, treasure trove.
The narrative that came out, perhaps the central narrative, was the courage of Obama, that he made this call. He said in that war room.
He did.
But what you're disputing is that it wasn't so courageous, in the sense that they had the cooperation of the Pakistanis. They knew it was Bin Laden. I mean, what's the great courage here?
Well, the one always the one risk, the thing that kept it at 50%, when they talked about, Obama talked about only 50% sure, because if you didn't know it was Bin Laden there, if that was the way we were described us, we weren't 100% sure. Remember they had to say Geronimo, which meant they got him. And of course they knew it was Bin Laden. That was false. And
they weren't going to get any resistance because it was Pakistani guards that simply left.
And the other side of it is also that the only risk, once you know it's Bin Laden, you then have the situation where the only risk you have is, will a chopper go down? And if you want to know what I've been told, and I didn't write this in the article because it seemed like so much inside baseball, it was such an easy mission. If you think about it, the SEALs are flying in to kill a guy in a country with which we're not at war. And there's a mile away from the Abbottabad is their West Point. That's where they train their military. And 2 miles away is the division headquarters. They're coming in, happy as clams, no air cover, talking about rappelling down, rappelling into a courtyard where anybody with a BB gun could hit them. And why? Because they know it's safe. My belief, and I didn't write this because that even the second chopper was redundancy. You just need one. 2 groups. The SEALs are in squads of 6 because that's how many fit into a dinghy, which is funny because none of the SEALs have been in water in so long. They've been just underground slogging it out since 9/11. SEALs are trained to do underwater stuff, and so that's why they have squads of 6. Anyway, so one squad went in to kill him. The other squad did cover. And the other 2 squads, I guess, were going to work outside. The chopper goes down, and then there's a problem. You got to call up. You have a backup chopper, maybe 25 minutes flying time away, and the backup chopper it's a Chinook. It's a big hopper, a big chopper. It was filled with what they call a bladder of gas, of petrol, fuel. The planes are going to refuel from the larger choppers that were left they were about 20 minutes flying time away, discreetly far enough away, and they had to take out the bladder and put in, reconfigure it so they can get troops and people into it. So instead of a mission that the time is going to be 20 minutes, it's now 40 minutes. So the only tension was that. But the guys are just hanging around. They're not worrying about it. I mean, the more you think about it, the more you realize it's almost ineluctable that we're not told the whole story.
You've exploded 2 very big bombs here. One bomb in Pakistani politics, because for everything that they were afraid of, the chief of the army and chief of ISI, well, it's now out, and if this is believed in Pakistan, everything they were afraid of is now they're a target for. The Al-Qaeda, the Taliban forces, popular opinion that hates this kind of cooperation with the Americans is all going to turn on them. So that's one bomb.
And by the way, just to interrupt and say that I think the Pakistani government announced today they were going to begin a formal investigation into this.
And they said they're going to issue a statement later this week.
Yeah.
And then the other bomb is one of the central legacies of President Obama. He got Bin Laden.
Well, that's tough because I support him, as a human being. I voted for him twice, and I think he's the smartest president we've had probably since Lincoln. He's a pretty amazing guy. And I do end up by the piece by saying, look, the Obama of 2011, a year before re-election, some black dude wants to be reelected twice in America. You got to be kidding me. I mean, I can understand reaching out and doing what you can. And the president we have now, who is hanging tough in Iran, is a different person and telling the Republicans to go stick it where the sun don't shine. This is a different person. So you have to say that. But there's no question then, I hope we can we won't get a statement from him. We won't get a real statement from the White House because it's an embarrassment. It wasn't the best day in the sun.
But the more this story has traction, and mainstream media, everybody's talking about it.
Well, but they're not. There's an awful lot of bitching at me, basically.
Well, this is where I was heading. There's only one way to critique this, which is to attack the messenger.
Well, the White House started that. They began to talk about it, saying things like, there's so many inaccuracies in this story, we don't know where to begin, and I can't stand reading it. Meanwhile, nobody's, and so the press writes, the White House attacks, debunks story, but they don't say a word about anything official. I just got a call today saying that the CIA may end up saying today that we don't think there was a walk-in. But that's permissible in the CIA to protect the walk-in. And here's the thing that I mentioned, I probably should have done more about it. In terms of state of mind, The head of the Joint Special Operations Command, which ran this mission, is an admiral named McRaven. He's now chancellor of the University of Texas. And a bright guy, smart guy, admiral, 3 4-star admiral, ambitious like all of them. And so in 2013, about 2 years after the event, there was a lot of questions raised, particularly about all aspects, constant freedom of information questions. The White House kept on talking about they buried him on, he was buried at sea. Bin Laden, there's just a lot of, I just write about this a lot. I don't definitively say, I can just tell you many people I know that really know the issue don't believe it happened.
Well, you quote 2 sources that tell you the funeral never happened on the ship.
Well, yeah, I have one guy that said to me, a wonderful line, you mean he's not in the water? He said, laughing. When I asked him about it, I went back, and I go back to these people all the time. And so I also quote a Pakistani former ISI general, a very competent guy named Asad Durrani, on the record saying that when this happened, as a former head of the ISI, he served in the 90s there, he said, I began to ask questions and I got the same answers you did, Mr. Hersh. And he said that on the record, a lot of back and forth on that. And he said that my understanding was there was a walk-in and the Americans were, we were involved, and the Americans didn't, the word he used was double-crossed. And we sort of changed it. I went to him and said, let's just say that they just had a change of mind, because double-cross suggests from the moment it started, Obama wasn't going to play, was going to cut off the 2 generals. I don't think so. I think it was done. He was pushed that into the last minute, but I don't know. In any case, we're left with this.
Just go back to Obama going public on this. By going public, when he announces this, not in the agreed upon way, I mean, it's quite opportunistic because of the elections, one would think, because now he emerges as the guy that got.
Well, he was going to be able to say it, but it's much.
But he also he opens the door for the possible revelation that you do get to eventually, of the role of the Pakistani generals. And this
absolutely.
And this is a real threat to, you would think, to American, the way they perceive American national security.
Yes, and I'm sure there was, it's clear there was a big fight that night. Gates, in his memoir, writes very bitterly about that night, but he doesn't say what the issue is. So he was really against it. And I know there was a lot of animosity in that White House towards Bob Gates. And I think that probably helped think that if they ought to go public now, because Gates, who was a Republican, Gates, I've got no problem with Gates. I don't think he would have done it. But they were, Gates had been very much against what they did, going public, and also against Gates ostensibly said he was protecting the SEALs, but it's pretty clear to me that his real motive is he's also protecting the generals.
Are you convinced that Bin Laden was under arrest, or was he being protected?
Oh, no, he was a prisoner. In the control of. He wasn't a prisoner in the sense that there's a lockdown, and he gets a shower every other day or something like that.
If I remember the story, it sounded like couriers are coming back and forth.
No, that's all, but that was just lie.
That's all bull.
Well, of course. Look, if you have a walk-in, and you don't want to say you have a walk-in, which is legitimate, you got to invent a story. So here comes the wise guys at the CIA saying, well, let's just say we did all this brilliant work and we found couriers. And then the other thing the CIA wanted to say, and this is what was set off Gates, they wanted the president to announce we found the couriers because of enhanced interrogation, because of torture. And if you ever saw that movie Zero Dark 30, it begins with torture, which is the way the CIA guys wanted it. And Gates said, you can't do that. That isn't what happened. And it's in the torture report, too, that way. I actually get into that in the piece a little bit.
Well, obviously, the movie is also a complete fabrication.
Yeah, but if anybody that goes through a movie and thinks he's seen the real thing,
but it's a fabrication based on a fabrication.
It's a fabrication of a fabrication. But if you go to a movie suspecting this is going to be the real McCoy, you're in trouble. It's when I like it when they say it's based on a true life story.
There's a Navy SEAL that disputes that your account that says there was no firefight. He says there was.
When he said that the body was real full of holes and we were throwing it out the helicopter, that an ISI guy helped us up the stairs. If we had any help from most other countries, we put them in the back and we just bring them along to say they're along. We do the work. There was no ISI in there. There was 3 men. We killed 2 of them down, one in the guest house. We killed 1 on the first floor, and then we killed Khalid bin Laden, the son, on the stairs. And then we went up into the room. I saw Osama bin Laden standing on 2 feet. There were no ISI up there. I shot him in the head twice, and then I shot him again in the face when he was on the ground.
Also, the Bissonnette book. This is O'Neill, who hasn't written the book, but he's one of the 2 shooters. And also Bissonnette, who wrote a book called No Easy Day, I think. Mark Bissonette. In his book, he's got a dramatic account of shooting away. The only thing I can tell you is from the very first moment I heard about this story, from the Americans, from somebody who had access to what the SEALs had reported, the only bullet fired was into the leg of a woman. And all I can tell you, the other side of the story is there's just no question that if the Pakistanis, I've been told this repeatedly, the Pakistanis told everybody, all the guards, to get out. They wanted the SEALs to land without any weapons there. There were people living in the compound. Had a big house, and it had a little house where there were people. Caretakers. I don't know what they were. There were people, and but the notion that the SEALs landed with bullets flying. The only thing I can say, I have no reason to believe that's true. And Bissonette also,
This is again all based on your primary source.
But from the very beginning, long before the books came out, O'Neill also said that we went in there terrified, thinking, this is it, we're going to die. Well, maybe he did, but that wasn't what the impression I had, what the attitude towards the mission was.
Now, a big part of the official narrative is that Bin Laden was still in control. He was still the mastermind.
Right.
But you write that Bin Laden was delusional, had limited contact with the outside world outside his compound.
Well, I'm quoting somebody named Patrick Coburn, I think, in that case. He was describing that we finally released about 3 years later some alleged documents that we took from Bin Laden's house. I'm not saying documents weren't fine. They weren't taken by the SEALs. The next day, ISI came into the house and probably cleaned it out, I'm sure. The ISI also took away, he had a couple of wives and a bunch of children. And we were told we would get to see, we never saw them again. A year later, they were flown to Saudi Arabia. We never interviewed any of them. And all these sort of lacuna, these things that end up not being covered, are sort of fascinating to me, because so many things were said that didn't happen. And if you go and I read the accounts of the various memoirs, there's huge discrepancy between who did what, which is the byproduct of having an operational plan that at the last minute is changed. Once the president says we're going to go tonight, we're going to go public, they have to change it. They have to explain why they got to identify him so quick. So they have to have DNA, the fastest turnaround on DNA I've ever seen. You know, to do DNA right, it takes quite a while. You can do a test, and you have to take it really carefully looked at in a lab. And they don't have that kind of equipment out there. You have to fly it to Frankfurt and get it analyzed. That's just, we're talking about days. But they had instant. They had to invent instant. They had to get rid of a body instantly. They had to get a body instantly. It all changed.
The walk-in happens. The Americans tell the Pakistani senior generals that they know about Bin Laden. They want to come and get him. Do you have any evidence or information about the role and attitude of the Saudis towards all this? Because Bin Laden is, he may be under their control, but he's also a figure of enormous, as you were saying. He's an icon that they're very careful about.
Well,
I can understand the leverage the U.S. government had with the Pakistanis vis-a-vis the military support.
The whole Saudi position was primarily to keep them away from us. That's all. And that's when there was a showdown in Leon Panetta's office about it. I write about this. This is a section of the book. There was a showdown about what are you doing? Why did you tell us about it? And he says, hey, A, we're getting paid, and B, the Saudis had a reason. They didn't want you to talk to the guy. And the Pakistanis had a reason to keep him, because as long as they had him, they had the Taliban in both countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the Sunni crazies, the Sunni fundamentalists, talking to them, because they told them right away, we got your guy. There were a number of people who knew about this that did talk. This is not a shock. You're talking among your fellow tribesmen and talking to us is a big difference.
Because I said you have set off 2 bombs, but it's really 3 bombs, because there's a bomb under the Saudis too.
How about the bomb under me? There's a bomb under me too. So there's 4 bombs.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I don't like all this. I was accused of plagiarism in a magazine.
Well, I was saying the only way they can go after your piece, is to go after you.
Yeah, but I've done that before. Been there. That's not going to last long. But the only problem they have is if they start getting into the definitive denials, and see, the CIA can probably get away with telling an untruth on grounds of protecting the source, the walk-in. But they haven't done that yet. The administration has been very clever. They just attacking me, and they haven't really gone after any facts in the story. But that's going to change.
But they also can't really go after your source, one would think, because if they ever wanted to try to figure out who your source is and charge them, they validate the story.
NC. No comment.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.